In 2008, the French National Police switched to LiMux. No permission requested from any vendor. They are still running it. 5 precedents, every alignment, no reversal, not one. The argument that survived was not cost savings, it was whose law the software answered to. France just applied that argument to 2.5 million government desks. Can an election override a jurisdictional argument? Let's get into it. In 2018, Congress passed a law giving American authorities access to data held by American companies anywhere in the world. In 2025, Microsoft France confirmed this on oath before the French Senate. The answer was 4 words: if we are compelled, we comply. This is the Hamberger report. I'm Andreas Hamberger, enterprise architect and AI governance practitioner, Wellington, the Cloud Computing, Legal Clarity, and Lawful Overseas Use of Data Act. The Cloud Act lets American authorities compel American technology companies to produce data they hold, wherever the servers physically sit. A data center in Paris does not change the obligation. The company is American, the company can be ordered, and the data follows the company's jurisdiction rather than the building's address. This was not a flaw in Windows. It was a description of the law. 10 months after that Senate testimony, France acted on that sentence. In April 2026, France's Interministerial Digital Directorate issued a binding instruction to every government ministry. Produce a plan to remove extra-European digital dependencies across 8 categories. Around 2.5 million civil service workstations are in scope. DINUM, the Directorate, is not a department's help desk. It is a service of the Prime Minister with directive authority across the whole of central government. The 8 categories reach far beyond the desktop: workstations and operating systems, collaboration and communication tools, antivirus and security software, artificial intelligence and algorithms, databases and storage, virtualization and cloud infrastructure, and network and telecommunications equipment. Ministry plans are due in the autumn of 2026, with full deployment targeted at roughly 2030. The destination is Linux. The reason given is not money, it is sovereignty. France is not swapping one product for another. It is auditing an entire stack for a single property, whose law governs it. France is not attempting this from a standing start. The Gendarmerie Nationale began moving to open source tools in 2004 and built its own Ubuntu-based distribution from 2008. As of June 2024, it ran on 103,164 workstations, about 97% of the force's computers. For the same work and the same results, Windows would have cost roughly 2 million euros a year more than Ubuntu. Updates that once required administrators to travel to remote posts, including stations in French Polynesia, could be pushed out within a fortnight. If the open source governance story sits in your frame, free as in theft, the channel's Permanent Friday series launches Friday the 28th of August. It traces this question from Bell Labs in 1969 to the AI era. Link in the description. The number to hold is not the workstation count. It is the calendar. Ubuntu has run since 2008 through 5 presidential terms and governments of different political alignment without a reversal. In February 2026, DINUM cited the Gendarmerie when justifying the national rollout, not a vendor demonstration, but 18 years of a French institution renewing the same choice. Anyone who followed Linux through the 2000s knows the counter-example, and it is the reason to be cautious. Munich's LiMux project began in 2004 and became the flagship every open source advocate cited. It moved about 15,000 workstations to a custom Linux build. It cost roughly 18.7 million euros to develop and saved the city money while it ran. Then in 2017, the city council voted to go back to Windows. Reversing the migration was later estimated at around 49.3 million euros in licenses, hardware and labor. Munich did not fail on technical grounds. It did not fail on cost. It failed on politics. The reversal followed a change of mayor after the 2014 election. The lesson was uncomfortable. A migration sustained by a political champion lasts exactly as long as the champion does. When the savings argument met a new administration that preferred the incumbent vendor, The savings argument lost. Munich has since answered that lesson. After a 2020 election, it recommitted to open source under the principle public money, public code, stood up an open source program office in 2024, and now publishes its code on shared repositories. The case for open source has rested on three arguments: freedom, cost, and technical merit. France's decision adds a fourth, that Torvalds in 1991 and Raymond in 1997 did not need to name jurisdiction. The first three arguments are reversible by an election. A new administration can decide the savings are not worth the friction, and the migration unwinds the way Munich's did. Jurisdiction does not bend that way. The Cloud Act is not a configuration error. An American company stated under oath that it cannot protect a foreign government's data from American law. The defense layer reached this conclusion before the civil one. France's domestic intelligence service has moved to replace data analytics software from the American firm Palantir with tools from the French company Chaps Vision, specifically to avoid new strategic dependencies in sensitive functions. The United States Navy has run LiMux inside submarine combat systems for years on the reasoning that a fighting platform should not depend on a tool chain it cannot fully inspect or control. Germany Schleswig-Holstein is 80% through moving 30,000 workstations to Linux, with reported annual savings of 15 million euros and the same sovereignty framing. When armed forces treat the operating system as territory, the question France has put to 2.5 million desks is already answered. There is a coordination dimension that matters. France and Germany held a joint summit on digital sovereignty in late 2025 and stood up a task force. And a community effort called EUOS is building a shared public sector Linux space that national governments could customize. It would be a mistake to oversell what an operating system migration achieves on its own. The Cloud Act problem does not live only at the desktop. It applies to any American domiciled provider at any layer. A ministry that moves from Windows to Linux but keeps its cloud, its security tooling, or its AI services with American jurisdiction vendors has closed the gap at one layer and left it open at the others. That is precisely why Dynam's directive names 8 categories and not 1. The structural question sits closer to home as well. The Technology Users Association of New Zealand, TUNZ, used its 2026 priorities report to describe the country's posture as strategic drift, connectivity, computing power, and infrastructure increasingly supplied by a small number of foreign providers operating under foreign regulation. New Zealand's own framework, NZ Goal SE, advises agencies to consider open source but does not mandate it. The question France answered out loud is the same one sitting unanswered here. What does it mean to run a country on software governed by someone else's law? I founded a Linux distribution and ran it from New Zealand, and I spent the years since inside enterprise architecture watching organizations choose their tool chains. That pattern was almost always the same. Cost and convenience won. The question of who ultimately controlled the software rarely made it onto the agenda. France has just made that question the agenda. France's Gendarmerie made this choice 18 years ago and has not reversed it. Across 5 presidential terms, through budget cuts and reorganizations, under governments of every alignment. The migration that persists is the one built on an argument the next administration cannot talk its way out of. Open source does not solve the sovereignty problem by itself. It opens the door to solving it. The closed source question was never about the software. It was always about the keys. When did you last audit the jurisdiction of the software your organization depends on?
That is the Hamberger report for today. If this was useful, subscribe and hit the like button. It helps more professionals find the channel. You will find links to everything we covered in the description below. I am Andreas Hamberger, and I will see you tomorrow.
Like and subscribe.